Good Sunday morning to all. After close to 2 months in Canada and the United States, I returned to my home on Kibbutz Ruchama in southern Israel late Saturday night. It was a bit of a nail-biter. The flights I had booked months ago were canceled, and with my legendary agent's help, we rebooked the configuration 5 times over a 2-week period. In fact, 6 hours before takeoff from Toronto, we had to do it all again. Why? Because very few airlines will fly into Israel, which means that we have to get creative with connections and routes. And of course, the best ones are booked up, and sometimes canceled. And. I ended up doing Toronto to Zurich, then on to Athens, and finally to Tel Aviv. Just a quick consumer warning tip. I thought I had booked the last leg on an Israeli airline, which I wanted to do for security and safety reasons. Turns out that the airline is flying pretty much any plane with any staff it can buy. In Athens airport, there was a room jammed full of Israelis returning home from holidays and no security, none. Not even the secondary security that has, until now, in my experience, been de rigueur in all European airports, even before October 7th. So, if I was to repeat my trip, I would ask many more questions of the airline. Okay, done with the consumer report. It is great to be back in my other home. I'm wildly jet-lagged, of course, but felt impelled to be here on October 7th, and I made it. It's also a treat to be in the same time zone as Katz and my awesome editor and sound guy, Amir White. We get into all of it today, me and Yaakov. A new IDF operation in northern Gaza that began last night, the ongoing battles with Hezbollah in Lebanon, and of course, the masterful streak of successes from pagers to precision strikes that have hammered upper leadership of the Hezbollah terror organization. We discuss Iran. Will Israel retaliate? When? How? The high level of engagement of the U.S. political and military establishments brings with it pros and cons. Just before I left Toronto on Friday night, so many friends suggested that I stay just a little bit longer, wait it out, at least until the end of the holiday period. And I thought, we've been living on this knife edge for a year now, since early April with Iran as well. Who knows when it will end? If and how? We don't. This is the uncertainty we live with here. It's not heroic, it just is what it is, of necessity. I'm Vivian Berkovich, former Canadian ambassador to Israel, and now hanging tough with 9.5 million other Israelis, the vast majority of whom live in the sprawling state of Tel Aviv. Stay with us. Good morning, Yaakov. How are you today?
Good morning, Vivian. I am well.
Excellent. I'm a little foggy in the brain. As you know, I returned to Israel yesterday after a long multi-flight journey, so I'll try to be as crisp as you today. Not sure I'll beat the standard. I have a lot to talk about and a lot going on. Let's start with the operation last night, apparently, that began in the Gaza Strip to prevent Hamas from regrouping. That's what I've kind of read in various reports this morning. And I guess my first question is, if we've destroyed 23 of 24 battalions, as Prime Minister was saying the other day, then what is left to regroup?
It's not just what's left to regroup. It's the challenge that Israel keeps on encountering in Gaza is, and you even saw this in the IDF statement that came out, announcing this new operation by the 162nd Division that's taking place in northern Gaza in an area called Hezballah, which is the refugee camp up in the north, is that they are trying to reestablish their terrorist infrastructure. That is the exact wording of the IDF statement. So it had been destroyed, it had been degraded, and when there is a vacuum, Hamas is rebuilding. And this has long been the challenge that Israel's facing when it comes to Gaza, because in the absence of a day after plan, a new governing entity plan, a who is going to fill the vacuum plan, what ends up happening, Hamas comes back and they start to rebuild. So because of intelligence and indications that this was in fact happening, the 162nd Division, together with, got a couple of really serious units that have seen a lot of combat over the last year, like the 401st Armored Brigade. They operate the IDF's most advanced Merkava Mark IV tank. Like they're in there. You got a lot of Air Force. You got another brigade called the 215th Brigade. I mean, they've been attacking since last night, taking over the area, going after weapons storage centers, some more underground infrastructure like tunnels, and trying to clear out smoke out the Hamas terrorists who are there.
How many fighters are in a battalion?
It depends, but it could be upwards of about 500, 600, 700.
Okay. So if it's true, as the government tells us, that the IDF has destroyed, knocked out, whatever phrase or word you want to use, 23 of 24 brigades. How many fighters are in a brigade?
Brigades are, again, I don't know exactly the Hamas brigade versus what I gave you now is like the IDF brigade, right? Every IDF battalion. The Hamas numbers could be slightly different, but we know that Hamas had about 30, 40,000 fighters at the beginning of this conflict, right? So if you figure that they take out, again, what does it mean when they destroy the brigade? They don't kill every member of the brigade. They destroy the command and control. They break it up. They eliminate a core component of the brigade. So if a brigade makes up 1,500, 2,000 soldiers, or terrorists in this case, then if you kill 1,000 or 700, that's going to make that brigade a little more difficult to manage and to operate. And if you've killed off the commanders, the top brigade commander, the deputy commander, as well as some of the battalion commanders, so who's in charge? So you've eliminated some of the key components that allow it to continue to operate. I mean, God forbid, but if we were to apply it by us, imagine God forbid this should ever happen, but if you have like one of the IDF infantry brigade that the commander is killed and the deputy commander is killed and the battalion commanders are all killed, and then half the brigade is killed, do you have a brigade? Probably not anymore.
Yeah, if a tree falls in the forest, does somebody hear it? I expect that, a lot of our listeners will be wondering the same things I'm wondering as you're talking, which is, just try to keep it simplistic. But if you have 23 out of 24 brigades that have serious damage and for which we've created serious problems, then the question becomes, really? And there's still even a sizable threat left? There's still something left to regroup to become a sizable threat? So this gets back to the stuff that we've been talking about all through this war is, what these terms mean. We've spoken often about what it means to destroy Hamas, but, we haven't been out of there very long. So I have to say I was a little surprised to read that we are mounting this operation to prevent Hamas from regrouping and becoming something of a force to be reckoned with.
And this is big. This is just in the north in one specific area, right? I mean, you've seen this happen all throughout the war, is that whenever Israel leaves an area, there are still Hamas people there. Even if we look at the numbers, there's about 40,000 people that the Palestinians claim have been killed in Gaza. We claim that half of them are Hamas or Islamic Jihad fighters. So pretty much you've eliminated half of their fighting force, but they still had 15, 20,000 people, right? Yeah. Who have weapons, who are card-carrying members of. Now, to really eliminate their ability, what you have to do, and I hear this from government ministers, the real victory. Sadly, they don't say the victory is the return of the hostages. That's what I think both of us share that sentiment. But what they talk about is that the victory is the removal of Hamas as the governing entity over Gaza. How can you achieve that if you don't have someone else to come in to govern Gaza? As long as you don't have someone else to come in and govern Gaza, now maybe there's a master plan that Bibi has somewhere up his sleeve that you and I just don't know about yet, but I'm a little skeptical. So as long as you don't have that plan, what's going to end up having to happen is you're going to have to go back in all the time and conduct these operations.
The lack of a plan, lack of thinking of the day after, and also not really knowing if and who is organizing things. Sinwar, we're hearing, probably is alive, may not be alive. No known communication with him now for an extended period of time, which could mean anything because we don't have precise information. Anything to say about Sinwar and where he's at? Because, of course, that's tied directly to the fate of the hostages, as far as we know.
Yeah, so Sinwar is still where he was over the last few weeks, which is offline, off the grid, and not, showing his proof of life. There was a very interesting article in the New York Times, I think it was yesterday or the day before, which basically pointed to the fact that the American estimates are that he is still alive and that he is still managing things, that he is something that we've known for a while. Sinwar's dream, his main fantasy has always been to try to draw Israel into a regional war. He wanted Hezbollah to attack on October 7th
Right.
alongside Hamas. Hezbollah did not do that. But now that he sees that this might be happening, so it could be that he's actually just keeping a lower profile for the time being because he actually wants to see that this leads in that direction. But even if Sinwar is somehow out of commission, that would be a nice symbolic victory for Israel, just like it was taking out Nasrallah. But that doesn't mean that you won the war, right? You still have other senior Hamas members, including his brother, Mohammed Sinwar, who is one of the senior Hamas leaders and is able to continue to command forces even in the absence of his brother. But would it be a symbolic victory? It would be. Would it be important? Definitely. I mean, you just remind me, I did an interview right before the holiday on a BBC radio show, and the interviewer wanted to ask me a question and said, preface the question by saying, we could argue if it's right or wrong to have killed Nasrallah. And she went to ask the question. I said, excuse me for a minute. I just have to say something. It is always the right thing to do to eliminate your enemy who has the blood of thousands of people on his hands. It's always the right thing. Always. You could talk about timing, strategy, but these bad people always deserve to be killed 100 times over.
Yeah, it's quite astonishing, some of the things that are said on media, but then again, not surprising. Still astonishing. I just want to make the point that New York Times article that you referred to, I thought was really interesting because unfortunately we don't get some of this intelligence and analysis in real time. But in that period, it seems kind of late spring, early summer, when we were very buoyed and optimistic about the possibility of a deal, Sinwar was kind of depressed and fatalistic and angry that no one had come into the war to bolster and boost his fighters, of course, being Hezbollah, even possibly Iran. And that the one thing that mattered to him, the article said, was surviving politically, point you've made repeatedly on this podcast, surviving politically, just like his nemesis, Benjamin Netanyahu, to see the next day. And that his hopes for that were kind of dashed for a number of months. And now maybe he's sort of feeling a little better again, as you said, because finally a regional war is starting up.
By the way, the other thing that was interesting in that article is that they, quoting American sources, they said very clearly that Hamas does not want a deal. They had to then balance it out and say that also Netanyahu has put up problems with the deal. But I heard this weeks ago from a top U.S. official who's really involved in everything going on here, that it's Hamas who had, when we were all hoping back in, over the summer and even as the fall began, or definitely spring and summer, that there was going to be a deal and it seemed imminent and another round of talk, was Hamas that killed that. It wasn't Israel.
That's good to know, conclusively. Thanks for listening to this point. The next 20 plus minutes of this podcast are available to paying subscribers only. Please consider supporting State of Tel Aviv with a paid subscription. Just go to stateoftelaviv.com and it's easy as 1, 2, 3. For many months, the Sunday Update podcast was for paid subscribers only. We allowed a bit of a respite in the period leading up to Rosh Hashanah, but will now revert to our ongoing model. We'd really appreciate and need your support. Please consider our request and hope to see you on the other side. Bye for now.